Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Nice that we could all make it today with no snow in the way like last time. So I did learn the downside of canceling Sunday school in a week is I have a whole other week to think about it. So now there's a whole bunch more stuff that may not have been there the first time. So that may slow us down. But anyways, first off, we're going to take the summary that we did last time for Genesis 20 to 22. We'll put it in the bucket that it goes with. And the title was The Sister Trick Again with Abimelech Before Isaac is Born, resulting in a treaty where Abraham owns Beersheba. And then Abraham's faith is tested with the command to sacrifice his only son. The summary was, Abraham deceives Abimelech. Abimelech makes a treaty with Abraham. God's promise to Sarah comes true with Isaac's birth, finally. They sent Hagar and Ishmael away with nothing. Abraham was asked to sacrifice Isaac, and God stopped Isaac's sacrifice. So, there goes in the bucket. And now we need to do the one from last time for Genesis 22 to 25. So we had in Slack a week ago suggestion for a title, and Julie and Mike Passion both, I think, contributed. And the title was really long. So I took, because a lot of stuff happened in that section. So I took those and just put all those suggestions in the summary, and we made a short title here. And I'll read through them, and then you guys tell me if we need to add or remove anything from this. So this came from Slack. So Sarah and Abraham die, and Isaac gets a wife and sons. That was our title. The first item was that Sarah dies, and Abraham purchases her tomb in Canaan. Abraham sends his servant to find a wife in his homeland for Isaac. God leads him to Rebekah, and she returns and marries Isaac. Abraham marries Keturah and births 6 children. Abraham dies and is buried with Sarah. Ishmael, descendant, has 12 sons. I should have changed that. Just Ishmael has 12 sons.
To be honest, I only knew about 2 of Abraham's sons, actually.
He had 6 more with Keturah. That's what we read last time.
I never heard that.
Yep, it's there at the end of Genesis 20.
It must be a
22.
very unknown fact.
He sent him away, and we don't really know much of what happened to him after that, other than
that might
Midian.
explain why.
Yeah. So Ishmael dies, and Ishmael's descendants are hostile toward all their relatives, as predicted. Rebekah has twins, Esau and Jacob, and Esau the hunter sells his birthright to Jacob, who Rebekah loves. Anything to add to that? I thought that was actually pretty good.
That's a good summary.
Okay. Did we miss anything? All right, we'll take that then for this coming summary. So, I thought we might start today just a little bit with reorienting ourselves in where we are on this timeline behind me on the board. Because the point was to see this all through a telescope, right? So can you guys kind of see this? So this over here is the birth of Abraham around 2166 BC. So some of these numbers, there's some easy numbers to remember, okay? 2100 Abraham. 1000 David. David's at 1000 BC. That's a really easy one to remember. And then the other big one is 586 BC, which comes right here. And that is where, so 605 is first where the first Jews go to Babylon, and then 586 is right here where all the Jews are taken out of Israel and they end up in Babylon. That's like the big defining event for this entire story. So we have 2100 Abraham, 1000 David, 586 got taken to Babylon, and then of course 0, Jesus comes. That's kind of the overall gist of it. So we're right here. We started with Abraham, we got Ishmael, we got Isaac, and then we got Jacob and Esau right here. Now, one thing that is going to happen this week is we're going to have some prophecies about what happens to Esau. So Esau gets a second name, Edom, which means red, because he wanted some red soup one day, which is strange. I mean, you know how those nicknames come about, but that ends up being the name of his entire nation. So, like, it's kind of a strange thing to think that lived on that long. So, if we want to understand what the prophecies tell us about Edom, we should kind of see what happens to Edom, his descendants afterward. So, first off, Edom is founded right here at around 1929 BC when Jacob flees to, when Jacob flees to live with his uncle Laban. right? Like when he takes off, we don't really know at what point Edom just gets out of town and goes to start his own nation, but it's roughly around that time. So that's where Edom starts. There's not a whole lot more mention of Edom. They're an enemy of Israel. They're not kind to them in the desert as Israel's trying to come back from Egypt and so on. Until we get down here to David. So let's see, where David conquers Edom. So that's one of the first things. David completely conquers the territory of Edom. Well, I should show it to you on the map. Oh, come on. There we go. So Canaan was up in here, and Esau basically comes over here to the east and founds Edom in this region right here. So this is where Edom is the whole time, and they're an enemy of Israel until David finally conquers them there in the period around 1000 BC. Then not long after that we get Solomon. Solomon screws everything up for everybody, and then his son Rehoboam loses the whole kingdom. It gets divided, and at that point they lose most of at least the eastern side of Edom. They still get a little bit of the western side left, so that's about 930 BC, coming right about here. And then the King Jehoram right here, about 100 years later, he actually finally loses all the rest of it. So there's no Edom left controlled by Israel at that point. Then there's a guy named Amaziah. When we get to kings, he's right about here. So after Jehoram, we get Amaziah, another king of Judah in the south here. He actually makes a raid into Edom and captures their capital city, a city named Petra. You can go visit it today. And the story was he made 10,000 people jump off a cliff, and he murdered another 1,000. And so it was considered a major victory. But he didn't really capture Edom. He just had the capital city for a little while, and then it's back. So these prophecies we're going to read about Esau and Jacob, how Esau is going to serve Jacob, it's a little muddled through this. Edom wins sometimes, Israel wins sometimes. But then at this 586 point, the important point, when Babylon comes from the north and is trying to capture Judah, Edom joins them and starts attacking Judah. And so then when Babylon finally carries them off, Babylon turns on Edom and kicks them out. And they end up having to migrate up into this region here. So Edom moves from here into actually southern Canaan that was part of Judah under the reign of Babylon. Then Alexander the Great, if you remember that history of how he came and took the Persian Empire. So Alexander the Great right about here. Well, Malachi predicts that Edom's gone and it's not going to come back. That happens in Malachi. That's where God says, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. He says, Edom's not coming back. And it doesn't. He says, nobody's going to rebuild it here. They're stuck living over here. And so that's Malachi right there. Alexander the Great comes along, and he Hellenized everything, which means he made everything Greek. So what was named Edom got translated into Idumea. And so it's still Edom, but it's like the Greek version of Edom. And so Idumea is how we know of the Edomites after that. And then it's all over, come finally, 125 BC, this guy named John Hyrcanus, who was the high priest of Israel at the time, became also the governor of Israel under the Seleucid kings, who came after Alexander. And so this guy, John Hyrcanus, takes all of the Edomites in Idumea, forces them to convert to Judaism, forces them to have circumcision. It was not a great day. And the Edomites disappear from the historical record after that point. So that's what's going to happen to Esau's descendants. That's why we don't know where any of them are anymore. They essentially became Jews.
Idumea sounds like the name of a Greek model.
It does. Idumea?
Yeah. It's an attractive name, is what I meant.
It is a pretty name, I agree with that. But the first, so you know Herod Antipas, his father Antipater was the first Jewish king installed in this area by the Seleucids, and he was actually an Idumean. So he had converted to Judaism, but he was actually an Idumean at that point. But that's the last we hear of him. So that's what happens to Esau. So now let's start right in. We're going to go in Genesis
26.
Yes, at the end of 25, verse 19. That's where we left off last time because we ran out of time. I know I'm not going to get to chapter 28 today. The odds are good we may not finish 27, but we will go through at a stable pace and we will get what we get. So, verse 19 of chapter 25 of Genesis. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. That is like the shortest genealogy in the entire Bible. Abraham, Isaac. There you go.
Yeah, usually those genealogies are long.
Yeah, they're very long.
And sometimes the names are really difficult to pronounce.
Yes, these are easier, at least
Yeah,
for me.
way easier.
And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. The children struggled within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" In other words, if God's the one who ordained this, if he's the one who let me have children, why am I having these children fighting in my womb? So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out all red, all his body like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Hairy, which is what Esau means. So he was hairy, Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob, which means cheater or deceiver. So his parents set him up for success. Thank you, Mom, for naming me deceiver. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. And so they got married at 40, so it had been 20 years they'd been trying to have kids.
I'm guessing they marry very late.
Not in that culture, no, because everybody lived quite a bit longer. But he waited till his mom died at 37, and then 3 years later he got married.
Okay, it's just like, well, I know like in the early days people married really early, so.
Not back then, they seemed to marry later on.
I know, that's basically what I just said. Actually, that basically it is.
Yeah. So, when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So, I've talked pretty much every chapter of Genesis thus far about the criterion of embarrassment, like when we try to figure out if historical texts are accurate. If it's an embarrassing thing about the people who are bringing you the historical text, it's probably true, because you don't make up embarrassing things about yourself. Jacob never comes across well in this story. His name, the name of one of the patriarchs of Israel, is cheater or deceiver. So they probably didn't make that up. Isaac loved Esau. This is really the only mistake Isaac makes in the entire Bible. It's the only thing that ever sort of bites him that he did wrong. And why did he like Esau? Why did he love Esau? Food. I also am driven by my stomach. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach, I believe I have heard, and I have not been an exception to that rule. And it's strange because God says he hates Esau and loves Jacob. So, I mean, Isaac definitely is the opposite of God in this respect. But let's go back and read that message from God to Rebekah a little bit more closely. So every single commentator that I read had the same interpretation of this story. It's not to say there aren't other commentators, because if I come up with an idea that I haven't heard before and I find nobody else had it, then I'm wrong. The smartest human beings that have ever lived for 2,000 years have all studied this stuff in depth, okay? So there are people, like there is a serious tension here, but I never learned this. And it smacked me in the face while I was trying to figure out this story. So let's start by just looking at what did God say to Rebekah. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Does that say anything about God's promise to Abraham?
I want to say...
No. It just says there's 2 nations in your room and they're going to struggle together. Doesn't say anything about who's going to get my promise. Just says the older will serve the younger. So let's keep that in mind as we go. So Genesis 25 verse 29. When Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I'm exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." And Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. And thus Esau despised his birthright. So we hear this story and we usually think of Jacob as being awfully conniving. Like he took advantage of Esau in his moment of weakness. But, don't forget, what about Esau's complete disregard for the birthright? Literally was sold for soup, right? Like he was just kind of hungry. And he was willing to say, yeah, fine. I just need some soup right now. I think it's
honestly,
pretty clear.
That story was always hilarious to me.
I think it's pretty clear Isaac was not on board with this, because Isaac tries to give the birthright blessing to Esau anyways, right? So nobody asked Dad. Was it even Jacob's or Esau's to give? Like, was Esau allowed to do this? Did Isaac even know about it, right? Maybe they never told him. Did anybody ask God? Did anybody say, which of us should have the birthright? No, nobody asked God in this story.
No.
God had told Rebekah that the older would serve the younger, but didn't specifically say that means the birthright. I don't think Esau was serious about it. And I think
don't either.
You can tell this by how he reacts later on.
Exaggerating.
How he reacts later on when he finds out that his brother actually got the blessing that went with the birthright. He's surprised by this, right? He's like, wow. It's clearly a sort of, I didn't think that was real. Like, I didn't think that was really going to happen. So I personally don't think Esau was serious about it. But of course, Jacob's descendants wrote that in the story.
The fact that he knew he was Daddy's favorite.
Yes, that's exactly right. He's like, well, Dad's going to give it to me.
Doesn't matter what I say, Daddy can always overrule.
That is a very good point.
Yes. This is the classic sibling rivalry.
Yes, it is.
Aside from Cain and Abel, except this time, thankfully, no one murdered anyone.
Yes, although they were going to.
But, yeah.
Chapter 26.
Although they made up later.
There was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. We're going to talk about a lot of places here, so let's put those guys up on the map.
Yep, those guys are going to be a problem.
All right. So, Gerar, he went here. That's where Abimelech was from. And the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. This is the only famine where they don't go to Egypt in the Bible. Like all the other times you go to Egypt. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. That's these lands. Just to remind everybody. He's down here in Gerar, and this is the land of Canaan that they're all going to get one day. So this is what God's talking about when he's reassuring Isaac that, yeah, there's a famine now, but I am going to be true to my promise. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So this is the first recorded talk of God with Isaac. This is where God is telling Isaac, I'm going to continue this promise through you. I mean, he probably learned that from his dad, but this is where God's telling Isaac directly. Something that God does not say to Isaac here is that I am going to only have my promise continue through your son Jacob. He just says the promise is going to continue through you. And we see again here the concept of biblical faith. Like biblical faith was not, that God says because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, was not that Abraham believed I existed. It was that Abraham trusted me to do what I said. And Isaac here is essentially the same way. Isaac's one of the best people in the Old Testament. There's not a lot of bad you can say about Isaac other than he liked Esau. And so he has the faith of his father Abraham here. He trusts God. He stays in Gerar. He does not go to Egypt despite the famine. So let's move on. Chapter 6, or verse 6. Let's see. Let me check something. I'm missing a point there. Why does it say that all the nations of the earth shall be blessed there in in verse 5? It says, in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge. Have we ever said thank you to Abraham? Ever thought of that? He had a very hard life, right? No kids, despite that being what his name meant and what he wanted, until he was 99. You know, he had Ishmael first, has to send Ishmael away, is asked to sacrifice the other son, like all of the spiritual faith tests that Abraham had to endure throughout his life. And God's telling us here, because Abraham did that, all the earth will be blessed. We owe a great debt of gratitude to Abraham. So tonight, when you say your prayers, say, God, please tell Abraham thank you for me. Like, I would not be where I am if it were not for Abraham going through all of that. So Isaac settled in Gerar, verse 6. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, oh, she's my sister. I feel like I've heard this before.
Again, like father, like son.
For he feared to say my wife, thinking lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah. So it was sort of like, they're going to kill me because of my wife. What would Dad do? Right? Because she was attractive in appearance. And when he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of the window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. So Abimelech called to Isaac and said, behold, she's your wife. How then could you say she's my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I thought, well, lest I die because of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. So the first thing I thought when I read this story was that Abimelech must be the most forgetful guy in the history of the Bible. Like, right?
I know. Oh yeah, he's been
This just happened to you, man. How did you forget? So you can understand this story a lot better if you replace the name Abimelech with the word Pharaoh. Abimelech meant, it was like a title, like a position. The king of the Philistines was always named Abimelech, no matter what his original name was. So it is entirely likely enough time has passed. This is a different king of the Philistines than the one that Abraham dealt with.
Is it kind of like a Caesar position? Is it kind of like the Caesar position?
Yeah, like Caesar, like Augustus Caesar was the name. Like you become Caesar, you become Pharaoh, you become Abimelech. So, even though we've seen this 3 times now, this concept, there's still some new things that struck me here. First off, what you expect Abimelech to say after Isaac confronts him, that you guys were going to kill me if I didn't do this. You expect him to say, we wouldn't have killed you. That is not what he says. He does not deny that they would have killed him. He says, what did you do to us? One of us might have lain with your wife and we'd have been guilty. What kind of warped moral code is this? Right? Murder's fine, but if we lay with your wife, we're in trouble. Like, and realize what he's saying to Isaac. He's saying, yeah, we would have killed you, but forget about that. What about me? What about the guilt you would have brought on me? I mean, how awful is this? Is this culture? I mean, I see it as a complete lack of Philistine self-awareness.
Yeah.
All right? They did not, you would think if your culture keeps having this, just wait, Zabe. If this culture keeps having this happen to you, you might rethink it a little bit. You're like, wait. We keep almost getting trouble sleeping with men's wives because they're afraid we're going to kill them. Let's quit killing them. But there's a reason they don't. And that's because this is their moral compass, and this is still the moral compass of the non-Western world today. And fundamentally, power determines morality. And so in that world, it was just assumed and right inherently that the beautiful go to the powerful. There was no question. This is why he didn't say, we wouldn't have killed you. He assumes Isaac agrees with him. Yeah, of course, the most beautiful women go to the most powerful men. That's just the way it works. Like, sorry about your luck that you married beautiful women and didn't have the kind of power I had, but those are the breaks, buddy. That's the way the world works. And you can see this across almost the entire Muslim world today, especially with regard to non-Muslims. Like, for example, in England, prior to the massive immigration that they've been having from the third world of Muslims, in the year 2000, there were around 7,000 reported rapes in England. In the year 2024, there were 70,000. reported rapes.
Nice.
Because their culture is, if you're not Muslim, and you're beautiful, and I'm more powerful than you, you belong to me. I can do whatever I want. That's the moral code of this land. And so we give Abimelech a bad rap, but it's what he grew up with, right? He didn't have a God to tell him, no, that moral code is wrong. It was just cultural relativism. We have our culture, you have your culture, whatever. So, I want to come back and point out the differences between Abraham, Isaac, and these societies into which they found themselves with the sister trick, Egypt and the Philistines, and even in Sodom, right? Sodom did the same thing. Sodom and Gomorrah did the same thing, just to men instead of to the women. It was just kind of the powerful can take whatever they want. Benjamin, we read that story in Judges, like the tribe of Benjamin did this in Judges. But look at Abraham. So this is how they treated the stranger. How did Abraham treat the stranger? He was hospitable to him. He was kind to him. He fed him a meal. He tried to be as nice as he could. What was the criteria that the servant of Abraham used for choosing Rebekah, for determining that Rebekah was a good woman, that she had goodness in her? It was how she treated the stranger.
Yeah.
How you treat the stranger is the fundamental barometer or measuring stick that it's showing us for how we gauge the level of goodness of people. That's one thing the Bible is telling us here. And it also is another reason why I believe the Torah is 100% given by God, because this Torah set up a different culture that said you should be kind to the stranger, not the beautiful go to the powerful. But I think we can learn something about this ourselves, because if that's really how you measure goodness, if you want to look in a mirror and say, how is my goodness level doing? You ever seen the movie Lilo and Stitch, where she's like, your badness level is about here, right? So if you want to know how you look,
it's cute but sad at the same time.
if you want to know how you look in a mirror, right? It reflects back to you. If you want to know what you think about a topic, the mirror of the mind is writing. You write it out. You write out what you think about it, and that will clarify what it is you actually think about a topic. The mirror of your character is how you treat strangers who can do nothing for you. If you're considering getting married, if you're considering being friends with someone, look at how they treat people who can't do anything for them that they don't know. Waiters, waitresses, cab drivers. Gauge yourself this way. How do I treat people who I don't know, who can do nothing for me? And if you find that that's not how great you'd like it to be, make a change. That will be an increase in goodness if you increase the kindness level that you treat strangers. This is one of, like Judaism teaches, this is one of the core teachings of the Old Testament, that we are to be kind to the stranger, and that's a very unusual thing. And in the end, if you want to really see it starkly, Jesus was a stranger, right? God was a stranger on this earth, and look what we did to him. But he still was willing to die for all of those cruel people who could do nothing for him, right? We didn't do anything for Jesus, but he did a lot for us. So this is how you measure goodness, how you treat people you don't know. All right, so we'll go back to verse 12. And Isaac sowed in the land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." It takes a special kind of hatred to have a well that's right there in a land that needs water and fill it in, instead of just using it. Like, they filled it in so that hopefully Isaac doesn't come back and reclaim this stuff. Compare this to how the Philistines treated Abraham. They told Abraham, "You're blessed, stay here with us, so we'll be blessed too." These guys said, "You're too powerful, get out of here." Like, we don't even want you around. So the Philistines here, they chose the path of Cain. You remember when we talked about Cain, we said you have a choice of how to react to the success of others in your life. Right? You can either emulate them or honor them, or you can envy them and hate them. And the Philistines chose the get away from me instead of, what are you doing that's making you successful? Let me do that too, right? So they chose that path. This actually is the Jewish template in history. Nearly every place Jews have ever been, this is what happens. The Jews move in, they become very successful, the people of the surrounding culture become suspicious of them, and they do their best to kill them or kick them out. It happens everywhere they go.
Actually, like throughout their history.
Yes. So there's actually a very, very interesting book on this named The Israel Test I read years ago by a guy named George Gilder that is actually looking at dividing the world between how you view Israel, like how you view Jews. How does your culture view the Jews in Israel will determine your success. It actually is like a near 100% curve. You look at the Jews as a good thing and you're happy to have them, which Abimelech has a change of heart, you're successful. Essentially, you bless the Jews, you're blessed. You curse the Jews, you're cursed, which is what God told them. So if you're interested, that's a very good book. It's called The Israel Test. And ironically, it's the same thing today. The minute that the Philistines, literally the Philistines living in Gerar, the minute the Philistines today, the Palestinians, stop focusing all of their efforts on killing all the Jews they can find, they will start to be successful. But they don't do that. They focus all their effort on killing the Jews. All right. So, verse 17. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water's ours." So he called the name of the well Esek. So Esek is somewhere in this polygon right here. We don't really know that exact well, but it's somewhere in this polygon. Because there's just a few different options for where Esek could be. Of course, they had filled in the wells first, right? And then he finds water again. They're like, "Oh, that's ours, that's ours." Isaac was not a fighter, right? He dug the well, did the work, found the water again after they'd stopped it up, and he just moves on. He just names it contention, and he moves on. So it's verse 21. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called its name Sitnah, which is enmity. And he moved. So Sitnah is even harder. I looked up where they think Sitnah is. See if I can turn this on. There we go. One of those places, we have no idea. One of these places in the same region of Gerar. But those are possibilities for where Sitnah may be. That's why I kept it turned off, because it made the map really hard to read. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, "For the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." So here's Rehoboth. He moved a long ways away. That's why they didn't quarrel with him, because he got so far away from the center of Gerar that they were like, "Yeah, fine, you can have that." From there he went up to Beersheba, right here, after he dug that well. And the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you and will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And while he was at it, there Isaac's servants dug a well. He just digs wells everywhere. It's like water springs out of the ground behind the steps of Isaac.
How did they even dig that deep back in that day?
Sweat and shovels. Like,
I mean,
I agree.
once you get so far down, the ground gets
yeah,
hard.
the water there is not the 200 feet down that we are here, so
I guess
that's
it's
part
true.
of it. But that's also why they have to find shallow wells. They can't. There may be water way down, but they can't get to it. So that's why it was so unusual to find a well. So the fact that Isaac's digging all these wells, first, it does show, I think, that Isaac is preparing for descendants, right? Like, this is part of him trusting God. I'm digging all these wells because you need a well to found a city. You can't have a population without a well. So I'm going around digging all the wells, preparing for when God gives this land to us.
And water table is probably different than about 4,000-6,000 years ago than it is now.
That could be, yeah. I don't really know, but it could be. This is God's, like, if you look at God's introduction to Isaac, how does he introduce himself? This is how he introduces himself through most of the rest of the Bible, and I find it interesting. He doesn't say, "I am the creator of everything." "I'm the creator of the universe." He says, I'm your dad's God. I am the God of Abraham. Apparently, first off, that when God appeared to Isaac, it was not readily obvious that this Elohim was the Elohim. So he's telling him, this is who I am. If it had been obvious, he may not have said that. So he says, yes, I'm a spirit being, but I am the God of your father Abraham. And now the way that God is distinguishing himself from the other Elohim is by saying, I am the God who kept your nation as my inheritance, right? All the other gods, the other Elohim had their inheritance. I'm your God. I am the one who kept you as an inheritance for me. And that's actually how he identifies himself to us the rest of the time, is by the promise he made to Abraham. God is identified to humanity by his relationship to Abraham and that promise. What he's basically saying is, I'm the God who promised blessing to everybody through Abraham. He also opens with fear not. Again, right, there it is again. Apparently it's very scary to see a spiritual being, and specifically God. I think it is also interesting here when God is telling Isaac, I'm picking you, and later he's going to tell Jacob, I'm picking you. And he told Abraham, I'm picking you. None of these people are the people we would have picked, right? Isaac was not a fighter. Esau was the strong guy. Jacob was the one that dwelled in tents. God picks Jacob, not Esau. He picked Isaac, who was not the firstborn, right? He doesn't pick the firstborn. In fact, he doesn't pick the firstborn very often throughout the Bible. He picked Jacob over Esau. He picked Joseph over his brothers. He picked Moses over Aaron. He picked David over his brothers. He picked Solomon over his brothers. Like, firstborn doesn't mean much to God throughout the rest of the Bible. He picks who he's going to pick. And of course, none of us would have picked everyday peasant Galilean fishermen to carry the Messiah's message to the world. I think God is showing us something here. And that, remember, how do we know if a message came from God? It's if what the message said came true, right? It's if the miracle that accompanies the message is a miracle. Well, God is the only one who carries water in broken vessels. Because anybody else tried to do that, the water all spills out. When you see these people who are not who you would have picked, who are not the strong ones, who are not the firstborn, being the ones who are the major parts of the story, it's God's miracle of saying, hey, I'm acting here. So I think we can see that in his choice of Isaac as well, after we just learned how Isaac never fought for anything. So, verse 26, when Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Ahuzah, his advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his army, Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me, and have sent me away from you? They said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you, but we have done good to you. But we stopped up all your wells, and we kept, quarreling with you as you were digging them. But we've been nice to you, We have not touched you, have done to you nothing but good, and we sent you away in peace. Remember, it was, get out of here, go away, we don't want you here. We sent you away in peace. We're so nice to you. You are now the blessed of the Lord. We've had a change of heart. We think we can get rich if we keep you around. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths, and Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came to him and told him about the well that they had dug, and said to him, we found water. So the Philistines had stopped up the well at Beersheba, and his servants found it again. And so he called it Sheba, the same name his father called it. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. Remember, Sheba was derived from seven, which was derived from the word for oath, right? So that's why Abraham called it the well of seven, because of the 7 animals that they had sacrificed in the oath. Another oath happens here between Isaac and Abimelech, and so he names it the same thing. So let's see. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemeth, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. Remember how important it was for Abraham that Isaac not marry from the region around there?
Yes.
I think it's interesting that these Hittite women are inadvertently the saviors of Jacob. Because they're the reason that Jacob goes to Laban. That's the reason Rebekah uses to get Isaac to agree to send him to Laban so Esau won't kill him. She can't just say to Isaac, Esau's going to kill him, you got to get him out of here. It was, oh, these Hittite women are terrible to us. Please send Jacob back to my family so he can get a good woman. Right? So in the end, they end up being his savior. But it is important to understand, in this story, you think that means that's why Esau doesn't get the promise. One of the reasons he doesn't get the promise from God. Marriage within the family was never a condition of God's promise. None of Jacob's descendants, who all get the promise, married within the family. In fact, if you look at Perez, through whom Jesus' line flows, like that was through Judah. That was Judah's forbidden relationship with the wife of his dead son. And she was a Canaanite. Like there's no requirement you had to marry within the family in order for the promise to come through you. All right, so chapter 27. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his older son, and he said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." Hanani, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow. Go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it, and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me two good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Well, behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing." His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go, bring them to me." So he went and took them and brought them to his mother. And his mother prepared delicious food, such as his father loved. And then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands, and the smooth part of his neck, and she put the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. Who deceived Isaac? Rebekah.
His wife.
We blame Jacob. But Jacob and Esau's tenuous relationship was exacerbated by their parents. Their parents, instead of fixing it and say, "We love you both equally, get along," Mom says, "I love Jacob," Dad says, "I love Isaac." And they just perpetuated this rivalry throughout their entire lives. Notice in this story, Esau is referred to as the older son. It's not referred to as the firstborn, assumedly because of the birthright sale. Isaac sent Esau out to hunt game for him. Another proof that this was an early written text, because Jews don't hunt. They're not allowed to kill animals in a non-kosher way. The kosher way is you have to slit a very particular vein in the throat so they feel almost no pain and die instantly. And when you hunt, that doesn't happen. And so the fact that one of the patriarchs loved his hunter son, who was going to bring him this hunted game, is not according to kosher laws at all. So there's a lot left out of this story. Did Isaac know the birthright transfer? Did Rebekah know? It doesn't say whether she was ever told or not. Did Rebekah tell Isaac what God told her about the children in her womb, or did she keep it to herself? Did Isaac know that God told Rebekah that the older will serve the younger? If Isaac knew, did Isaac think that his blessing that he's trying to give Esau here was contrary to God, or did he think this is just the usual blessing that he would pronounce on his eldest son? Did Isaac think he had the power to confer God's blessing? Was Isaac trying to end run around God and give the blessing to Esau so that God's promise would flow through Esau instead of flowing through Jacob? That's what most of the commentators I read said. They thought Isaac was trying to end run around God Was God bound by Rebekah and Jacob's deception? Like, because they deceived Isaac, is he now stuck with it? He's like, well, I guess Jacob's got to be the guy who gets the promise. I don't know. I think when we interpret this story, we should recognize all these things are left out. And God doesn't leave out stuff we need to know, right? He put what we need to know in the text. So whatever interpretation we come up with, I don't think it can be on the questions we don't have the answers for. The answer we get must be something that doesn't care what the answers to all those questions are. And I think there's a really obvious one staring us in the face, is that the birthright has nothing to do with God's promise. Nowhere did God say, will the firstborn be the one that gets my promise? Right? All of Jacob's sons get the promise. All 12 of them. If you might say, well, it eventually just flows through one. Well, that one is Judah, not Reuben. He wasn't the firstborn. There wasn't ever any question of Reuben's going to get the promise and all the other sons get nothing. Right? Isaac wasn't the firstborn. Ishmael was. So God never said the oldest son gets the promise and everybody else is left out in the cold. That's not the point of this story. It's not that we're conferring God's blessing on them. And so that's why we don't need to know, because this is not about the transference of God's blessing. We learn that God picks Jacob when he meets him at Bethel and says, you get the promise. He might have picked Esau too if Esau hadn't planned to murder Jacob. You never know. So I think, so the reason this story, you'd say, well then why is the story even there? Well, take it out. Take it out and we jump from Isaac and Esau are born and there's like a birthright sale maybe, to all of a sudden Jacob is in Paddan Aram with his uncle Laban for 14 years and comes back with Leah and Rachel. Like, what happened in the middle? Why is he in Paddan Aram? He's in Paddan Aram because his brother was going to kill him because he stole his blessing. The blessing in that culture was, and we learned this in Sunday school, I think 2 classes ago, or two of the courses ago, that whole culture was family-based. And so one of the sons, the firstborn, became the patriarch, the head of the family later, and his job was to take care of everybody else. That's what the birthright was. That's what Jacob was bestowing on, he thought, on Esau. You're going to be in charge now. I'm old. I'm ready to step down and retire. And it's your job to run the family. That's what the birthright is. Who's going to run the family? Not who gets God's promise through whom all the nations will be blessed. So I think once I understood that, this story made a whole lot more sense. This is the family internal rivalry that we're seeing here. We're seeing why things happen. But it's not like God was stuck. That Jacob and Rebekah deceived Isaac, and so now, well, Jacob gets the birthright because he gets the blessing because he got the birthright. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And if you go and read these, we're not going to get to them, but when we get to reading these blessings, you're going to see it doesn't say anything about God's blessing to them. It's really just the standard birthright blessing of a father to a son, saying you're going to run the family now, like you're in charge. So. Anyways, I think we will stop there. So we'll pick up next time at verse 19.
It appears that the birthright and the blessing are 2 different things, with a little bit of differences between them. So
I agree, and that is confusing too, because Esau at the end says, first he stole my birthright, and then he stole my blessing, right? And this is a point I'd make when we get there. It's a little weird to me. They treat, Isaac treats this as irrevocable. Like he can't change it once he's made it, even though it was made in error.
it's almost kind of like he was going against God, and then once it happened, he realized it's happening how God had said it was going to happen, and he just gives into it and realizes it's...
It is possible. Jacob doesn't say God won't let, or Isaac doesn't say God won't let me change it. He just treats it like it's legally irrevocable. Like everybody just understands this. To which I say, has this specific situation actually come up that often? That this is baked into the common law? That if the birthright accidentally gets passed to a different son because the dad is blind, that son gets it, even if we discover
Not sure if that ever
I don't know, it's
happened.
weird. Yeah, I don't know. I find this stuff weird.
Same thing's kind of parallel when Jacob blesses Joseph's 2 sons. He switches his hands.
Yeah.
And gives it to the younger.
You're right, he does. So I do think there's some birthright cultural thing here that we don't fully understand. But apparently it was irrevocable, like once it's been made, it's done. He's in charge now, and since I'm not in charge, I guess it would be sort of like once the prince has become king, the old king's not king anymore, so he can't change the law. So it may be something like that. All good questions. This is why this story is so interesting. All right, so next week we'll pick up there. My goal was to get through to the end of chapter 30 next week, with Jacob stuck with Laban after 14 years, and he's about ready to make his escape. So we'll try to tackle up through chapter 30 next time. Okay, thanks guys.